right, welcome everyone. I'm Zain Asher. Tonight, Mark Zuckerberg has broken his silence on the data scandal that has consumed his company over the past few days. We heard from Zuckerberg, the man himself. He admitted that mistakes have been made with users' information, and he made several promises that he was going to fix them. In a statement posted in the last few hours, Zuckerberg says that he takes responsibility. The buck stops with him. He takes responsibility for letting user data end up in the hands of Cambridge Analytica. He announced several new measures to tighten up Facebook's data policies, including new restrictions on what data third-party companies can store. Zuckerberg is also due to sit down with CNN's Laurie Siegel for an exclusive interview on CNN later tonight. If you're in London, that will be 1 a.m. your time. He said in his written statement on Facebook, he said, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what happens on our platforms. I know it takes longer to fix all of these issues than we'd like, but I promise you we'll work through this and build a better service over the long term. All right, so much to discuss here. Joining me now is CNN senior reporter Dylan Byers and Shelly Palmer, CEO of the Palmer Group. So, Shelly, I want to begin with you since you're right in front of me. So I read this statement, and there were a few things that I want to get your take on this, that I myself found alarming. And a lot of people have mentioned this before. Number one, the fact that third-party apps even had access to the data of your friends in the first place. A lot of people would find that egregious. Second of all, that Mark Zuckerberg actually knew about this scandal, this debacle, since 2015. We, the users, are only just finding out about it now. And third of all, that when Cambridge Analytica said, hey, listen, we've deleted all the data, Mark Zuckerberg instantly believed them, only to find out later that that may or may not have been true. Is this forgivable?
Well, wow. That's a lot of questions that are all kind of well asked and they should be asked. Let's take them one at a time. Should you have data available to third parties, and should that data include not only your data, but the data from your friends? Whether that's right or wrong, in 2014, that was Facebook's policy, and they'd published that policy. We could argue that it's a bad idea or a good idea, but that was what you agreed to when you clicked the user license agreement. Now, I could morally say to you, wow, that sounds awful, and I could make all kinds of personal comments about what we think in 2018 should have happened in 2014. But in 2014, that was their policy. And so Facebook is free. No, it's not. Facebook is nothing like free. You get to use the service
information
because
is the product that is being sold.
Your information is what you pay for Facebook with. So back then, it was not a very well understood business. They were trying to basically serve you the right ad at the right time and to get you engaged, and they felt that this was a way to do it. We've really matured over the last 4 years, and certainly through the election. But back in 2014, in a more innocent time, that was their policy. It hasn't been their policy for quite some time. And so we're talking about data prior to that. The next question you asked was, well, Mark Zuckerberg knew in 2015, what should he have said? I can't answer for Mark Zuckerberg, but I can tell you that everyone that I know at Facebook, people who are very close, know that he is, and have said to me, in all honesty, he's beside himself with,
I can imagine,
and wants to fix this. And with an engineering brain like Zuckerberg has, and he is first and foremost an engineer, his first inclination is to fix it, right? And I thought his statement today,
he outlined several ways in which he was trying to fix it.
He absolutely did. And what I believe in earnest is the right thing for him to have done is said, look, the buck stops with me. He's taken full responsibility. He knows this is super important. So you've got a guy who's an engineer at heart, who wants to fix things, who knows how to forensically look and fix things, knows it needs to be fixed, and has agreed to fix it. I don't know what more they can actually do at the moment. We could argue whether it was a good idea or a bad idea over the last few years. The last question you asked was about Cambridge Analytica, how'd they get their hands on the bad guys, and how'd they get their hands on it, and what went down.
And that they told Mark that they deleted it.
That they deleted the data and that they believed them. I think Facebook is going to have to answer for that flat out. I think someone's going to have to go to Facebook and say, wait, did they give you an affidavit? Did they, how do you know they deleted this data? I think that is a reasonable question that any reasonable person would ask, and I think Facebook owes everyone an answer about that.
Shelly, stand by. Let me bring in Dylan Byers into the conversation. So Dylan, you know, we waited 4 days for this statement from Mark Zuckerberg. Apparently, he wanted to wait so that he could give a really detailed, thoughtful response, certainly understandable. Was this particular statement worth the wait, do you think?
Well, you know, first of all, everything that Shelly said is absolutely right and certainly lines up with all of our reporting. Look, being the CEO of a company requires more than just sort of, going into hiding for 4 days and working on improving the product and then coming out. You also have to be aware of the sort of public conversation and the narrative that's happening out there. There was a lot of time for a very critical narrative about Facebook to develop and fester over the course, certainly of Monday and Tuesday and today, before Mark Zuckerberg came out with this statement. You ask, is it enough? Was it worth the wait? I don't know. Look, almost everything that happened in this scandal happened above board. It happened in line with Facebook policy. Users do go online and they do, or at least they did in the past, agree to share this data and to have your data shared if you were a friend of somebody who shared their data. All that is true. But the problem is that I think Americans especially have been willfully naive about how much data they are sharing. And what issues like this and issues like Facebook's role in Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign highlight is that Facebook's reach of our data, the way that they follow us around whenever we're online, even when we're not on Facebook-owned platforms, that Facebook really has a lot of this data, and that this data can always be exploited, can always be manipulated by third parties, and that no matter what Facebook does, there's always the possibility of a violation like this. They can monitor it better, but they can never wholly prevent it. And so the real question here is, are people going to look and rethink about whether or not they want to be giving their data to a platform that they haven't been able to trust in the past, that certainly, like you said, took years to address this problem? And are they willing to continue trusting that platform when they know, again, that they can't wholly prevent this problem from happening again? I'm not so sure that's the case. On the other hand, we're talking about over 2 billion users around the world. That's a lot of heft. That's, Facebook could see user declines of 2 or 3% and really ultimately wouldn't hurt the bottom line.
Okay, fair enough. But in terms of user responsibility, both of you brought up a very interesting point about user responsibility, because what is our responsibility? Yes, of course, we clicked yes to the terms and conditions. But if you talk to ordinary people who are on Facebook, many of whom are teenagers, many of whom are very, very young, the privacy policies of Facebook are so cumbersome and so difficult to understand. A lot of people think, Shelly, that is done by design. What are your thoughts?
It's neither done by design or not by design. We give up our privacy for the quality of our enjoyment of the internet. If you want to see relevant ads and relevant content, if you want to dynamically create an environment for you that you are most likely to want to engage with, then you have to give up your data in order for a computer, basically an algorithm, to give you what you want. If you want to see plain vanilla ads and plain vanilla content, it will become an incredibly emotionally unsatisfying experience. So we all say, oh, I could deal with that. No, you really couldn't. You'd find this to be an incredibly cumbersome environment. We have to break this down. We're living in a world where we create data everywhere. Everything we do, we create data points. When you say Facebook knows something about me, no, they don't. Facebook has a data set, and if you ask the data set, can I find Zane, people like Zane, who are likely to buy this thing at this day, if you ask the right question, it will give you back an answer. And that's how Facebook uses Facebook, and that's how the data is rightly used. What we're talking about is when data is used improperly by a bad actor. Now, Robert Mueller III has a new job, but in his old job as director of the FBI, he had a great quote, my most favorite quote on this subject. There are only two kinds of companies in the world, companies that have been hacked and companies that do not know they have been hacked. And in this case, it wasn't even a hack. This was inside of policy because we were too young.
This is completely above board, as you said.
That's right. We were too young as a society and too young in business to understand the ramifications of this much data. So now we're coming into a world where we're living in a data-driven society, and none of us can say we understand fully what the dangers are. It might be worth a stronger look.
Zane, I do want to go back. I would like to go back to your question. Yeah, sure. There's something really important there, which is the question of, we agree to these user agreements, and they're really long, and they're really cumbersome, and ultimately it's on us for just scrolling to the bottom and clicking OK and not really thinking about the data we're giving up. But there is regulation coming in the European Union at the end of May that is going to make this a much clearer choice for Facebook users and other social media users in the European Union. You are going to have a clear option to say, would you like to share your data? And are you okay with that data being used for marketing purposes? You're also going to have the opportunity to take back your data and give it to another company. That sort of regulation, look, I don't have a great deal of faith in the U.S. Congress's ability to impose that kind of regulation, but if that works in Europe, and if Europeans like that, that could be an interesting test case for tech regulation here in the United States later down the line.
That is certainly a valid point. A lot of people are saying that regulators have been at least 5 steps behind technology companies.
They're always going to be.
But guys, I'm running out of time. I'm so sorry. Dylan Byers, thank you so much. I want to remind our viewers that you can actually catch more from Dylan Byers in terms of his newsletter, Pacific, that is available every single day. And Mark Zuckerberg is actually going to give an exclusive interview to CNN's Laurie Siegel in just a few hours from now. You can watch that on Anderson Cooper 360, which airs at 1 a.m. if you're in London, that is local time. And the interview will be replayed throughout the day on Thursday as well. After British and EU regulators told me they still want answers from Facebook, now Ireland's Data Protection Commissioner says she needs them to step up. Earlier, Helen Dixon told me companies like Facebook need to be held accountable.
I suppose what the events of the last weekend have highlighted for us is that even where Facebook have terms and policies in place for app developers, it doesn't necessarily give us the assurance that those app developers are abiding by the policies that Facebook have set, and that Facebook is active in terms of overseeing that there's no leakage of personal data, and the conditions such as the prohibition on selling on data to further third parties is being adhered to by app developers. So I suppose what we want to see change and what we want to oversee with Facebook now, and what we're demanding answers from Facebook in relation to, is first of all, what pre-clearance and what pre-authorization do they do before permitting app developers onto their platform? And secondly, once those app developers are operative and have apps collecting personal data, what kind of follow-up and active oversight steps does Facebook take to give us all reassurance that the type of issue that appears to have occurred in relation to Cambridge Analytica won't happen again?
All right, I'm joined now by Shelly Palmer again. Thank you for sticking around. So, you know, what she's talking about is really this inherent trust of third-party apps just doesn't seem to fly. I know that Mark Zuckerberg actually addressed in his post that he's going to make sure that third-party companies are going to agree to audits, and if they don't agree to audits, then they won't be allowed to work with Facebook. Fair enough. But are regulators also to blame somewhat as well? Because as you and I and Dylan were just talking about, regulators seem to be 2, 3, 4 steps behind these big tech firms.
First of all, let's break that down a little bit. What you need data for if you're a third-party app developer, and what you should be entitled to. How is it that your app actually works, and what do you really need? Facebook does kind of go a little bit into that. They do. And I think they've been, in their minds, pretty good about looking at how you use data that you would take input from in an app. If they get too crazy in regulation, and I'm saying this as politely as I can, regulators are going to be using a blunt force instrument on a very delicate situation, because not all data that you use, that you give up to somebody, is going to hurt anyone. It may really help you enjoy the app better or get more use out of the app. Waze, for example, if you don't tell it where you're going, and it doesn't keep a record of how you like to travel and where you're going back and forth to work, then it can't possibly ever learn enough about what you're doing. It will just each time just start from the beginning. So as we get into a world where we're using statistical machine learning and neural networks and augmented and artificial intelligence to analyze data for things that you do to make your lives better, if we don't give the data to the apps, the apps can't help us. And so we're just...
You have to strike the right balance, though.
That's exactly right. And so what we're hoping for, and I'm saying that with all of my heart, is that regulators don't have a knee-jerk reaction and go, well, they've done something bad, therefore we must regulate this to the point where, you know, it's so strict you can't actually get the good actors to benefit.
Right.
There is clearly a problem. But Facebook has said they understand there's a problem. Now, the question is, do people trust them well enough to give them a chance to fix it?
We shall see. All right, Shelly, stick around again.
Okay.
We have another tech story because, gosh, when it rains, it pours. There's certainly More bad news for Facebook, and this time it's coming from Europe specifically. The EU is proposing sweeping tax changes that could cost tech firms like Facebook and Google over $6 billion, with a B, dollars per year. The new digital tax would force companies to pay a levy based on where they make money rather than where the company's headquarters are actually located. So Shelly, this is about, for the Europeans, this is about basically leveling the playing field and sort of closing the legal loopholes that have existed for several years. What will it mean financially for these tech companies?
The tech companies pay about 10% tax in Europe right now, and normal businesses pay roughly 22, 23, 24% tax. And so the European regulators and the lawmakers are looking at that and saying, why and how? How does this work? How are they paying less tax? And the reason they've determined that they're paying less tax is the way that they are taxed by where their headquarters are versus where they're doing business throughout the 28 countries of the EU. And so the proposal is that they're going to tax businesses where the business is done at the point of the consumer's interaction with the business. I think it's misguided, but that's just me personally. I think they're going to have a very high bar. They're going to have to get a lot of buy-in. Certainly, there are small duchies and small countries like Estonia that are really benefiting from the way the tax laws are set up right now. And then there is the rest of the EU who have different feelings about how the tax law should be. They're looking right at tech companies because they're the easiest ones to look at, although they claim in Europe that it's not just about tech. I have also heard that it has nothing to do with the new tariffs that were proposed here in the United States. On the other hand, I think, wink, wink, everybody thinks that they are heavily related to this trade war that's about to start because taxation is a way to sort of fight a battle in that war. And so we've got a bunch of moving parts here.
But it'll be interesting to see how the European tax system works in conjunction with the new American taxes that are working here. I'm curious to see how they work together. All right, Shelly Palmer, thank you. Thank you so much for sticking around.
My
you
pleasure.
were the perfect guest to have today.
Thank you
and also thank you for coming in on a snow day. I know it wasn't easy to get here today. Thank you.